The music's on, the disco ball has dropped, and it's time to get this party started. You're listening to DiscoTrek, a Star Trek Discovery After Party podcast here on the Tricorder Transmissions Network. I'm your host, Heather Barker, and with me at the turntable is not Jeff Hewlett. He's not allowed in this podcast because this podcast is part 2 of our special women's panel talking about women representation in Star Trek Discovery. We have very many familiar faces and one new face, so I'm just going to go around the table and introduce everyone. We have Annika. Hi, Annika.
Hi, this is Annika, Manic Pixie Dane on Twitter.
Yay! We have Anna.
Hey guys, how you doing? It's Darth Anna77
Woo-woo!
on Twitter.
We have Rachel.
Hi, I'm Dramadorg884 on Twitter.
Boop, boop. We have Nina.
Hey everyone, I'm at Freckle and I'm really happy to not be forgotten this time.
No. We have Maizahia, the other Heather.
Hey everyone, I am at NerdyGal33 on Twitter, and you might hear my cats in the background because they like to be featured on the podcast as well.
We are very cat and all pet friendly. Even my parrot has made appearances on DiscoTrek before. And we have a new voice joining us. We are so happy to welcome Kat to the conversation. Kat, welcome, and will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Kat, K-A-T, short for Katma. I'm a professional pet sitter. I am a veteran of the U.S. Coast Guard, retired. So I had 20 years in military.
Thank you.
And let's see, I've been a Star Trek fan since 1967, so 51 of my 62 years.
Wow.
So yeah, I have a long perspective on Star Trek. So,
well, we're excited to have you here. It's great to have just such a wide variety of age ranges and all types of women. And I am also a professional pet sitter, so yay for having two of us here. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's jump back into this discussion. I wanted to talk a little bit about how important it is to have women creatives behind the scenes. And in addition to that, I think it's also interesting that we might talk about how some of the male creatives behind the scenes are also honoring women. But yeah, Star Trek has a history of having women writers. I think DC Fontana is one of the most well-known from back in TOS days. And there were several more women that wrote for TOS. You know, obviously there were a lot more men writing for Star Trek than women, but Star Trek Discovery has done a really good job of inviting all types of people to write for them. So yeah, I'm just curious to see, what your all's opinion is on having women creatives behind the scenes, how that has affected you as a viewer, and what you think that's brought to Discovery. So how about Rachel? We'll start with you.
I think it's very important. I noticed that on many shows I've watched, and Star Trek Discovery is one of them, that when there tends to be more women behind the scenes, there tend to be more well-rounded female characters or different varieties of women, because often in the past there'd be like the 1 or 2 women on the show and they act like what stereotypical like women characters, as opposed to you have very different characters like Michael Berman is very different from Tilly, who's very different from Kayla Detmeyer, who's very different from either version of Georgiou, who are both different from each other. I think you need that perspective and should have that perspective of women to fully enrich female characters.
Yeah, because we're not all the same, right?
Again, we don't all wear cat suits.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about Annika?
Kat just said cat suits, and I'm going to jump off of that because that was what I most wanted to bring up about behind the scenes is the costuming, because costuming and fashion is one of my passions. And so I always pay attention to what people are wearing and how that helps tell the story. Whereas Star Trek has often, has had iconic costuming since the beginning. I mean, that is 100% true. And William Ware Thesis, who did the original series, really pushed boundaries and did amazing things. But a lot of that involved having women wearing as little as possible and still getting it past the censors, which is a choice. It's even a kind of strong choice in the 60s, but I personally like to wear clothing and cover up a bit. That's just my choice. And so I like there to be variety. Like, that's not the only way to be sexy, is to show as much skin as possible, that kind of thing. And also not every woman wants to wear that to begin with. So I like the progression of costuming across Star Trek. And they eventually, the women were wearing sort of the same uniform as men. But in each series, up until Discovery, there was always the one girl who was in the most form-fitting catsuit possible, and that really showed off what a man finds sexy very specifically and very purposefully, which, again, from a sartorial perspective, I can appreciate what it's saying. And there are certain times that I really like some of the things that women wear. But why did the Doctor choose what 7 of 9 gets to wear, and why is it like what a teenage boy would choose? And I think the answer is men. So I really appreciate it when the Gersha Phillips, who is the main costume designer for Discovery, is a woman. She's a Black woman. She is amazingly creative and does not have any of this over-sexualization of the women characters. Like, there's a reason for everything that all of the women wear, and it's not to be sexy or to be treated as an object, or to even stand out. Like, Nan wears a skirt in the second season, even though she's like the chief of security. I love that she is the chief of security and the most girly in our crew. Like, I love that. It's amazing. She has this cute little hair, and she's just always looks very put together, and she wears the skirt. But I can totally imagine her like karate chopping people in her skirt anyway, because she wears leggings with it. It's not form-fitting. It's form-fitting, but it's not like skin tight. You know, it's not, it hangs on her appropriately. She looks adorable, but she also, like, I completely believe that she is capable of doing her job. And there was one scene where she did change into the pants version because she knew she was going to be more active. And it was like, that's what I would do, you know? It's like, that makes sense to me. So I really love all of the costuming, and I really, really think that having a woman designing the costumes makes a huge difference visually, and especially in science fiction.
Yeah, and none of the actresses in TOS really had any agency in making choices of what they were going to wear. And so I was happy with TNG to Enterprise's jumpsuits that were unisex. But again, there still was like Jerry Ryan in the catsuit, T'Pol in the catsuit.
And her pajamas. Don't forget T'Pol's wonderful pajamas.
Don't even get me started on T'Pol's pajamas. I mean, I like to call her my fashion Vulcan, because she wears more clothes than any other woman, and she had like 3 fewer seasons. but she is so dressed by a man. It is, it's just really disturbing.
Well, and then it comes down to even like talking about creatives and production, directing, all of those choices, where I think, you know, I can speak for myself and saying I love to wear sexy clothes. I don't mind showing off my skin. However, those are my choices. And when I'm dressing that way, I mean, honestly, I'm dressing for myself because I feel great about my body, and I want to walk into a room and be like, I feel great. But there really is rarely any agency shown in a woman wearing something. I think the only time, that was a general comment, there's very little agency shown when women wear these outfits. Like, I've got sexy pajamas. I picked them out. And while we can maybe conclude that T'Pol picked out her own sexy pajamas, we also know that Enterprise was written by men for men. Okay, there were women involved in Enterprise, but at the end of the day, a lot of these fashion choices are written for the male gaze, or are made for the male gaze. Go ahead.
You bring up an awesome point when you talk about like women showing that they make that choice to wear sexy clothes, because when you look at Discovery and the season finale of season 1, when they were getting dressed to go to Kronos, and Georgiou makes that comment like, I know Lorca would have something good to wear, or something like that, but it shows that like she chose that outfit, that sexy leather outfit. She chose it herself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Annika, did you have anything else to add?
No, I am willing to move on to the let someone else take it, because I feel like I talked a lot.
Woohoo.
Yeah.
Well, Heather, do you want to just take it away since you're, or sorry, who wanted to say something?
This is Kat. Having served in the military, I just wanted to point out my favorite thing was when they moved the women into uniforms. Troy in TNG and Dax in DS9, and all the Discovery uniforms. Everybody wears a form-fitting uniform, men and women.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody has boobies showing, because in the military, you don't want those distractions when you're doing your job. And I was always offended by those cat suits and so on, because it was like, yeah, they did it for the teenage boys who they thought were their core audience. And actually, women have been their core audience for 50 years. Anyway, I just wanted to point out that sexy is not the purpose of a military uniform. It's to be uniform. So.
I want to add something to that, because you know the Klingon boob window?
Yes.
It always seemed
we know it very
completely
well.
ridiculous to me, because why would women from a warrior race like just show off their most vulnerable? It's like, what are you doing? It seems like completely ridiculous to me.
Like, do you like, especially one where they often fight with like pointy things? I was like, they easier to
Yeah.
like,
Let me just say,
right
like,
through here, best place to get me, guys.
yes, as a woman longsword fencer, when I put on my clothes to fence, I wear a chest protector. And guess what, people? Yes, they do make chest protectors that are like boob form fitted. They are terrible because they are not made by women. They are made by men.
mm-hmm.
Right. When the sword, like if you're so you do a thrust into the chest. Sorry to go off topic here, but it's important. You do a thrust into the chest, like it's a plastic piece. Now you're also wearing a padded jacket, but your sword can still end up like moving to a side. Like it kind of goes all around. So I actually just wear the men's quotation marks chest protector, which is flat. And it does fine, like it covers up everything. So no, in no real combat situation would you just have a boob window out there. So again, that was a decision that I have no doubt was made by men.
And this week, Laurel came back and she's wearing this, what looks like an armored piece that is like not only doesn't have a boob window, but it like literally has specifically across her chest, like an armored piece. No, do not go there.
It's I don't want to say, I don't know that trope is the right word, but when you look specifically at the armor or protection for women characters who fight in some way, it's almost always created for the male gaze and not for reality. And this goes across all the superhero films and everything else. So yeah, it not functional. Not I'll be the first to die out there.
You saying about like you specifically buying like the men's version is like, so I have like a Starfleet uniform that I bought for like cosplay, and I bought like a cheap one because I don't have that much money yet, but I specifically bought the guys version because it was just a shirt, and the girls version was like the jumpsuit. And I was looking at reviews, and they're like, yeah, they didn't necessarily like make this so women with like a long torso and like bigger chests could wear this and like be able to breathe. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll just look a little worse, like, and get the non-form-fitting one so I can like not be like
hit on at conventions. No, sorry.
All day. Yeah, all I did was I just bought the men's shirt and then bought some black yoga pants, and I was like, perfect.
Yeah. So Heather, did you want to chime in with how important is it to you to have women creatives behind the scenes?
I would love to. I think there's so many different things you can talk about when it comes to the women creatives on Discovery, like not just the writing team, but also Discovery has the very first woman head of production design in Tamara Deverell, and they're doing awesome things and making sure they're including women directors when it comes to directing the episodes. Like in season 1, we only had 2 women who directed an episode, Lee Pace and Hanelle Culpepper, and they both returned in season 2, and they added 2 more women, Marta Cunningham, who was actually James Frain's wife, and Maja Virillo, I hope I said that right, I'm so sorry if I didn't, who is actually like a brand new director, doesn't have a lot of credits on her IMDb page. And I think, especially because that's one of the hot topics in Hollywood right now, is making sure women directors are being involved in the process, because you can have a story written by women, but the directors are the ones who translate that written story onto screen. So it's really important to have women voices in that as well.
Yeah. I think that a lot of Star Trek history, like in episodes where they've been written by women or women have had roles behind the scenes, then often are influenced by male perspective because of male directors. And even beyond that, I like to remind people that aside from everyone involved in creating the episode, then it even goes above and beyond to network heads. And I don't know a lot, admittedly, about who is involved with CBS production right now. But obviously we're living in a time where CBS is much more open about what they're going to put on screen. Whereas in the past, even up to, I think, Enterprise, definitely with DS9, there was still a lot that could not be shown. So you wind up being at war, and that's not just for women, that was for LGBTQ characters and disabled people and everything else. Like it's tough there, but I think definitely having more and more women higher up leads to having more positive women representation, for sure.
Well, and that helps a lot with it being on a streaming service as well, because as people want to criticize the fact that Discovery shows on All Access, that it's behind a paywall, that it's not available to the public, that helps with what they can, the liberties that they can show and the things that they can show on screen that wouldn't necessarily CBS would approve to show on public television. So there's a little bit less of an argument when you want to have amazing LGBTQ scenes or amazing scenes about women doing certain things that they might question more if it was going to be shown on cable, but they're not going to question it because it's going to be shown behind a paywall, and if people want to watch it, they're going to pay for it.
Yeah, which is also sad because everybody should be seeing this. Everybody. All right. Sorry, I get passionate about some things. So Nina, Miss Nina.
Yes.
Please chime in here.
Okay. Well, I think, first of all, to get it out of the way, to piggyback off of the costume thing, it's not only just like the costumes themselves, but the scenes that they're featured in, I feel like. Because, like, say there's this one episode of Voyager where B'Elanna sort of has this, like, it's kind of like a sexy blue nightgown. Do you remember that? And it's like silky or whatever. Like that's all good and fine. But then like the scene progresses into this like shot of her back when she's like taking it off, and I was like, a dude definitely did that. Like this is completely gratuitous. Like this adds nothing to the episode. We're just like seeing her sort of like as she takes off her clothes to take a shower. Like what is the point of that? So like the costume itself, you know, is maybe innocuous, but it's sort of like how you're showing that costume, like what it's doing and why it's there and like what's happening with it. And so I think anytime there's been something sexy in Discovery, it seems like it's not there like just trivially. It seems like it's actually doing something and not just like, oh, why don't we just like put this in, you know? And that's really nice. And like, you don't have to be half naked to like be appealing to the audience.
What?
Either. Like you just like Michael Burnham in the white shirt. I would take that over a catsuit any day. That was straight fire. So I'm glad that they're just letting things be practical, and then we appreciate it. And things still like things don't look bad, you know? So anyway, I think that the reason it's important to have women creatives behind the scenes is twofold. I think, first of all, for obviously in universe on the show, like if you're promoting diversity in the writer's room or in the director's chair or whatever, that is going to create an atmosphere of inclusivity and diversity and feminism. And it's going to probably open the minds of the male creatives too. It's just going to create a more diverse like environment just to have women who are empowering women on the show. It changes the whole vibe of like the planning, I think. And people who maybe weren't gonna do as feminist things with the show are now opened to that. And it creates a more complete picture on the show. So that atmosphere behind the scenes can change the whole dynamic. So it's important for the show, obviously, but I think it's also important out of universe and in real life, because it's giving women in a field where it's generally thought to not be very women-filled sci-fi, it's giving women an equal opportunity. That means that they can enable other women as well. Like when you have women in high positions, they will pull up other women. Like Tina Fey talked about this, like when she was the boss, she has the power to give those opportunities to other women down the line. And then it's just a cycle that keeps going of just empowerment. So out of universe, it's important to keep the line of women coming. That inspires others. Like, I think it's just a never-ending chain when you have women. Like, for me, I have always liked writing, and I used to like write stories on like printer paper when I was 6 and stuff. It's just something that's always been a part of my life. And one of the reasons I like Star Trek so much is for the writing, like the exploration into humanity, the storylines, the characters, to like my literary brain. It was super interesting. And Discovery was the first time, like seeing in the credits that an episode was like written by 2 women, it finally like clicked in my brain, and I was like, I could actually do this. Like, they're doing it. I could actually do whatever I wanted. Like, it felt real to me in that moment when I saw it. I was like, I could write too if I wanted to. Like, it felt tangible. That was really powerful for me. So I feel like both in universe and out of universe, it's important to have women, because it just creates just like a ripple effect of inspiration that just ends up taking over. And that's good for everyone involved.
Okay, can I just remind everyone here that Nina is 16, right? And that just rewind, like go back and listen to everything she said and listen to the enthusiasm there as well.
We love you, Nina.
Oh, I love you too. Oh my God.
So I'm 38. We have women of all ages here.
Yeah,
I
you
didn't.
got a nice range.
Yeah, I didn't really get into Star Trek until I was an adult. Lord, so 2009. I don't know, my 20s or something, later 20s. I didn't get to grow up watching Star Trek, so I didn't look to Star Trek for what women were doing. A lot of women my age either identified with, Dr. Crusher, some with Deanna Troi, but then especially Captain Janeway was like the first time we're getting a main woman captain character, and that just opened up worlds for a lot of women. But I think that it's important here to remember all of what Nina just said, but then also that for some young people, this is the first Star Trek they may be watching.
Well, mine, the first one I'm watching live, not the first one I've ever seen. But
Right,
it's like the
right.
first, like,
Yeah.
real, like, immersive experience.
Mm-hmm. And I think for some they have not. This is their first Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're watching it with their family. Maybe it's a young girl. I know there are conversations about the mature rating on Discovery, not letting kids watch, and et cetera, et cetera. But I know that there are some young women that are allowed to watch. And so
My daughter.
Yes. So seeing all that representation that Nina has just mentioned is just so formative for those young women. And I think that I just really want to drive that point home, that it's not just what we're seeing on screen. It's seeing that representation behind the scenes. It's being inspired to write in. I wish that Star Trek was still letting people write episodes and send them in, because that is a tradition that they did for so long, and I would love to see it again, because that's how we got a lot of Star Trek writers and just a lot of other people in entertainment.
And it's not just the cliche where you're like, oh my God, like I saw that like a woman did it and I was like, oh my God, I can do it. Like it sounds cliche, but it all happens subconsciously, where I'm watching this and I'm seeing these women listed or on screen or wherever, and just I'm absorbing it. I don't even realize it most of the time, I think, but it goes in, and that's what happens. And that it's a huge driving force, whether or not we realize it. It's really important.
It is. I really appreciate all that. And I'm trying not to cry because I'm so proud of you. All right. So let's move on. Anna, do you want to chime in?
Yes, ma'am.
Yay.
So, yeah. Disco, having women as directors, as writers, it's awesome. They have been able to build these incredible female characters that are rich in thought and in life. And I think that's very important to have our voices to convey that vision of the future, because today in the 21st century, let's just face it, we still see women's voices that are struggling to be heard, and to be heard without judgment, without criticism. And I don't want to get political here, but I'm going to for just a minute. But I mean, look at, and you can like her or you could not like her, but I want to take the example of Hillary Clinton. You cannot deny that she faced a lot of criticism, a lot of hate, a lot of, horrible things that were thrown at her simply because she was a woman. That's those are the facts, If she had been a man, I don't think that amount of scrutiny would have been there. So that goes to show you that we still struggle. And that's true if you look at other female political leaders in our country and in other countries as well, mainly here. So for Disco to have women behind the scenes says a lot for the direction that we all hope that, that humanity continues to go. Because even though we've made huge strides as human beings, we still have a long way to go, when you think about it. And again, not to get political, but there's a huge issue right now with the inequality in pay with regards to gender. And this is a big thing for me because I'm a Latina, and my group is at the bottom of the pay scale. And I know I'm getting off a little bit on a tangent, but it isn't just men's mentality that needs to change. it's also the woman that needs to change as well, get out of that traditional role. And there's not, and I don't want to say that being traditional is bad. I'm not saying that, but the woman has the voice as well. And that's very important. So I've seen to where, you know, instances where women are tearing each other down. No, we must speak up and elevate one another. And that's very important. And I think that disco is true to that message by having such strong characters, by having these wonderful women behind the cameras, at their computers writing the next scenes or what have you. So it's important to say that.
Star Trek has always been political.
Yeah, no, I know.
Like, being a woman is a political issue. Like,
oh, absolutely.
Especially being a woman of color. It is absolutely relevant. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, Kat.
Having women, there's one woman showrunner on Discovery. As to the writing, Bo-Yeon Kim and Erica Lipholt have knocked it out of the park just about every time they've written an episode. You have women scientists, and you've got young Tilly, who's enthusiastic and I think is going to bring girls into the STEM programs. You have Burnham, who's experienced, and she's fallible. She makes mistakes. And you have Admiral Cornwell. God bless her. I love her so much. Those role models are important. But also, I'd like to say that Gersha Phillips, the costume designer, is fantastic. And I know, Annika, you've already pointed this out. But she is on the level with Michael Kaplan, who did the uniforms and costume designs for J.J. Abrams movies. And the tailoring, oh my God, it's beautiful.
It's to die for.
Yeah, the Vulcans are the fashion icons of the galaxy, let me tell you. So that's super important. There are women working on the prosthetics team and so on. To Heather, our longsword fighter's point, the only thing I thought was illogical was the boob-shaped armor for the women in the Empire, but it looked so good, and everybody wore the armor. I mean, it was just like everybody wears the same basic thing in Discovery. And you see Emperor Giorgio, and she's completely covered, but she is sexy and formidable at the same time. So that's wonderful. And women bring centuries of understanding of oppression into their creative projects. Okay. Bo-Yeon Kim and Erica Lipholt, I keep picking on them because they're the two female writers I know the best, because every time I've noticed they're the fantastic writers. So we see Saru speaking up on behalf of the Kelpians' centuries-long sacrifices. We see Laurel stepping up to mother her race. And that's primarily been a patriarchy, the Klingons. So remember how they all laughed at her, when she was holding the bomb that could end all civilization. Yeah. And we see Cornwell, who's fallible, but she's not just bureaucratically stupid. She's not a character like Admiral Nechayev, on TNG. She always made these decisions where she seemed like always, she was almost always forcing them to do something incredibly stupid that Picard would roll his eyes and go along with. But anyway, and these women are not in the traditional roles of caretaker, the empath counselor, and the doctor. I also wanted to say, from the long perspective, Uhura was a role model for me. And this is back in the 60s. And yeah, she did wear that stupid miniskirt, but she was an officer on the bridge. Oh my God, that was really incredible back then. Okay. So Starfleet and the women in Starfleet are part of the reason I joined the Coast Guard, which is a helping organization. At least it was when I joined. The other thing I wanted to say is these big talents who've been sidelined for years, because hiring in Hollywood is not always based on talent alone. It's who you know. And it's luck, as Harrison Ford once said, fecking bags of luck. It was the key to his fantastic career. It's who you know. So I'm excited for the future of women in and coming out of the production of Star Trek. I'm excited to see them hiring and recommending other creative women in executive producing, writing, production design, makeup, and other behind the scenes fields. So they'll get more people of color and women more jobs in the industry.
I think that another darker reality of Hollywood, which has been more and more exposed in the past few years, is not just who you know, but what women are expected to do to get roles, to get jobs. And I, for one, now we don't know exactly what happened behind the scenes with Aaron Harberts and Gretchen Berg and how Ted Sullivan was involved and all of that. I know that it wasn't just these rumors of abuse, negative environment, bullying. I'm not entirely sure, but I did appreciate that action was taken. And whether that had, originated with, gender specific abuse, or I don't know. I don't think so. It seemed to be an overall issue with production and with maybe putting too much pressure on the writers and telling people what to do and trying to I don't know. We don't know. We'll probably never know. But I was pleased to see action being taken there. So I think for me, one of the biggest things I've noticed, and we talked about this a little bit in the first half of this discussion in our last episode, was how having women writers, producers, directors, and men who are allies of women helps to do things like show these women friendships, because you get a lot, Star Trek just has a history of, yes, here are women talking together, but they are talking about men. They're
really
not
bad stretching uniforms.
Yeah, they're not, and yes, sometimes they're talking about what needs to be done on a mission or on the ship or whatnot. But we don't get a lot of just regular, normal, daily discussions. And I will say, spoiler alert here, because we are now we just finished Through the Valley of Shadows in Star Trek Discovery. I think that was episode 12. And it was written by Boyoung Kim and Erica Lapolte. I just have to point out, and I did eventually tweet it yesterday, but Captain Pike's greatest moment now was written by women. Like, yes, it takes a great actor and everyone else involved to make that moment, but that moment was written by women. And I think it's just so important for people to really sit with that for a moment, because I saw so much congratulations and admiration and commendations for Anson Mount after the episode. I saw maybe a quarter of that same enthusiasm for the women who wrote the episode. We need more of that. And I don't know if, as women, we need to do a better job of sending out those messages. I think that Captain Pike is also a really good example of a man that has been written to show respect, admiration, appreciation for all of the women that he works with. And I think that is also why he's become this incredible character that everyone loves now. Although I know some women have found him problematic, and do we have any of those women here?
No.
No.
Not in Discovery.
My hand. I don't
In
think
the original series, he's very problematic.
Yeah.
Okay, Kat.
Pike is problematic in that he's very collaborative, somewhat over collaborative. The first time he ticked me off was when he said ranks aren't important. Oh, yes, they are. They're very important, because everyone works to gain their rank. Okay. So I wish he had said, give me your rank at first name, last name, whatever. The other thing I didn't like was when he called Owosekun Owo.
Yeah.
Now, I know that was probably a nickname among the crew, because fellow officers, fellow enlisted, they always shorten a name. There was a guy from Thailand named Karyon Sapipot, and his name became Peapod. So, you know, he probably would not hear the captain address him as such, okay? And another thing is that Pike will often look to Burnham first thing. Partly that's because she functions as his first officer, even though Saru is really the first officer. So I don't know. So sometimes he's looking to her too much. And I have to say, I miss Lorca for several reasons, but I miss Lorca in a way because he was very authoritative. And I hope if Prime Lorca comes back, he's a little more collaborative. But he was a decision maker. And that's what I saw from senior captains.
Right.
Now, again, my experience in the Coast Guard goes back to 40 to 20 years ago. So we've gone leaps and bounds since then. But I did like his decisiveness. I loved Pike in this last episode because he just sacrificed himself. I just thought that was so incredible. And this, again, was probably women writers.
It was. I mean, not only was it women writers, like, I don't know. I was watching that moment thinking, oh my God, are we going to go there? Like, are we going to go there? And
you hear the whirring, you know, and you're like, oh God.
It's like you go there and I'm just like, all right, I know how I feel about this moment. I don't know how everyone else is feeling about this moment. What is the reaction going to be? And then I see such just, proud reception of what happened. So not only did they went somewhere that they boldly went, y'all. Like they went somewhere that no one else has gone. And they did it, in my opinion, in a way that brought so much to that character. And I don't like the word, but brought so much to canon. And I am not a big, I throw canon out the window. Like, continuity is great. I'm not, I don't believe in this. I think that canon is a fiction. I don't think that canon was ever intended to be this restrictive vice that it has become. And so that's why I prefer continuity. And I know there's a whole debate over whether those two words mean the same thing or not. Whatever. I appreciated that this fit neatly into that story because we talked about this in the last episode of DiscoTrek for Perpetual Infinity, about if we went there and what you would see. Like, Jeff was very big on let's change his future and not make him disabled. And I was like, let's not erase the disability. And what they did was bring agency to that disability. Which I'm actually hoping to get another panel of other people with disabilities to talk about that type of change and that representation. But anyway, Annika, I did not forget you.
What you were saying there about disability and ableism, which was my main issue. I mean, the cage is like horrifically ableist and sexist, and there's just a lot there that I was hoping that Discovery would rewrite it and make it better, and that's what's happening. And I am just so grateful to Discovery for taking something that I was really on team let's pretend that never happened. I hate that the menagerie is a part of the original series because I just disagree with like everything that happens in the story. I hate that Spock decides that bringing Pike back to a fake reality is better than him living with being disabled, and that Vina being old and ugly is like the worst possible thing that could happen to a woman. And Discovery rewriting, like tweaking that so that it's like, yes, this all still happens, but we're going to make it Pike's choice. And they even, like, in the flashback or the flash forward, I guess, that we see in this episode, like, it made sense that he was in the chair. And because, like, my brother said, Pike and his chair would make more sense in a season that didn't include Arium. And it's sort of like, why couldn't they fix him if all of this technology exists? But they showed like that he was sort of still melting, that it was, so it's like something very specific to this accident with this radiation create something that they can't fix it in the way they could for other issues that happen to people. And that is, instead of erasing disability, that is saying that disability exists and you can still have a life. Like it has nothing to do, it doesn't stop you from living. If you know, and it's not about fixing the person, it's about addressing the disability to make that person's life easier to live. Like, I don't want to say, I don't know how to explain it in the correct terms where it sounds best. But like, I really appreciated that they are addressing the issues with misogyny and ableism that were inherent in Pike's like makeup, and saying, you know, we're going to make this a strength instead of a flaw.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I feel maybe a lot of us were internally rooting for that future we knew was inevitable to just be wiped off the map. But I think ultimately, if they would have done that, it would have been really dissatisfying. It would have made a lot of his arc feel like it was meaningless. Like this, I think ultimately this future is the payoff. But I think even though it hurt and I still have like a heavy lump of sadness in my chest, I think that it was brilliant. Like the way they took something that happens to him and reframed it as this noble self-sacrifice that not only furthered our main plot, but also affirmed amazing things about this character. I saw someone tweet, Pike is no longer just the captain before Kirk. And I feel like that is so true. That is so true. It was amazing. Like, it was so satisfying. It was so fulfilling just how that unfolded. I really felt like he came to like completion before my eyes. Seeing that two women wrote that, I just had to like lie on my bed and stare at the ceiling and absorb that. And if you follow me on Twitter, you know that lying on my bed and staring at the ceiling is like a common theme for me now for some reason. But anyway, I just felt so empowered. It sounds kind of cringy, but like I was sort of in awe of that.
I also like that they had him take a moment to himself to like kind of remind him of who he is. Because it made him feel, and I think I wrote about this, that Pike always seemed like more of an idea in series before this, and now he seems like a character. That he didn't, that makes him seem more human, that he is the good person who will do the right thing, but he needs a moment to remind himself that it's like, this is the right thing, instead of just throwing himself right away into, like, I can sacrifice myself, because even if I knew, like, something would be the right thing, I would need a moment to, like, myself to, like, come to grips with, like, what he'd just seen. And
I have a comment. I actually wanted to alter my answer. I don't have an issue with Anson's Pike. I actually have an issue with Jeffrey Hunter's Pike. I mentioned this on part 1, how I had a problem with him in the very beginning of The Cage, where he says something like, I can't get used to a woman on the bridge, or something to that effect. I can't remember the exact line. But I had a huge issue with that line, and you know, and nothing against Jeffrey Hunter, because I mean, that was a very cerebral episode, and of course, it's part of the Menagerie parts 1 and 2. But I always had a difficult time kind of relating to Pike because of that, you know, and I think that Anson's Pike has really broken down that barrier, for lack of a better word, and has gotten me to really respect Pike as an individual, as the captain, and kind of like what Rachel was saying, as a character. You know, I see him as an actual character. So anyways, that's it.
All right. Heather, were you trying to
like, just a little bit to go off of what Anna was saying, like, I think some of the changes and some of the things that Kat brought up that she didn't like about Pike, about Anson's Pike, are one of the reasons why Pike always has to look at Michael, and it's making an important fact known that he's respecting the women that's on his bridge. Because you take a line like that from the cage, which is so impactful to so many women who watched it, and you have to, like, the fact that he turns to Michael, the fact that he has respect for Cornwell, the fact that he values everyone's voice, not just the men, are things that make us look at Anson Mount's Pike and fall in love with him after seeing Jeffrey Hunter treat the women on his bridge like that. You can see the same character and see how he's evolved and how he respects women, and it makes an impact.
I think it,
Totally.
because I appreciate Kat's perspective, because, you know, that she's got that military experience. And so I think those are valid points about how a captain should address his crew. At the same time, I know there's also speculation of like how much of a military organization is Starfleet. There's a whole debate there and whatnot. I think also, just to the point of him looking to Michael, I think it's also just more so that Michael is so involved. Like, we know at this point that Michael is pretty much the reason that all of this is happening. And so I think that is probably why he is looking to her so much for insight and advice. But I think, Kat, did you have your hand up? Did you want to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, from the steely-jawed Jeffrey Hunter Pike, which was very 60s, we have evolved into Anson Mount's Pike. I guess what I'm saying about him being overly collaborative is every moment he looks to Michael, it's become, over the season, it's become more of a meeting of minds. Like Saru and Cornwell will be there as well, or Spock, and we'll have a discussion like they used to have on TNG. And that is a little more realistic, too.
Okay.
Lorca was an example of the authoritarian commander, which was not good, but he was a Terran. But God, Mount's Pike is just fantastically written, at least in the last few episodes. He kind of steps back when the Admiral's there, but that's pretty natural. She's more experienced and so on. I just wanted to put that in. I'm not saying the authoritative model is all the way to go. I just love Jason Isaacs. What can I say?
I love him too, Kat. He's awesome.
We all do. Okay, Rachel, did you have the last thing to say before we move on?
This is something that came in my head with like what I was saying, is that like after the episode, like it just something like in my head, like it made even more sense to me that I'm like, oh, I'm really glad the Medal for Valor is named after this guy in the future. Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, I love that we get to see the moment, and there was something, because we'd always known what the moment like was, but something about seeing it made me really appreciate that he's being honored like well into the future.
Yeah.
Of Star Trek.
There's more that I want to say about this topic, but I also want to move on to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to end this just by saying, I had mentioned in the beginning, talking about the men involved and the male allies that we have. And I feel like I'm opening up a door that I don't want to go into because it's going to be a longer discussion. But basically, I just wanted to send props to Alan B. McElroy and Brendan Schultz, who were the writers for Perpetual Infinity. That episode had a lot of screen time with Dr. Gabriel Burnham, Michael's mother, had interactions between Michael and her mother, had interactions between Georgiou and Michael's mother, which I thought were all very well done. The moments between Michael and her mom, when her mom finally opens up and is talking about having been there through her whole life, though I don't quite understand how. But regardless, I have my mom is a single mom. I was raised by her. She didn't eat so that I could eat. She is my best friend. I get emotional just talking about her. those moments between Michael and her mom like hit me really hard. Like they resonated because I know, and they haven't had that lifetime experience, but that bond, that strong mother love is still there. And I'm not a mother, but I know how much my mother loves me. And so I can imagine, like, I'm not going to say I'm not a mom, so I know what mom love is like, but I know how much my mom loves me. And I could see my mom as Gabriel. I could see myself as Michael. And the fact that that was written by men, I mean, obviously there are other women, you know, writing and helping these episodes along, but I was just blown away, and I show much respect. And so I think that on this note, having all of these women involved, as we've said, helps lend their perspective to the men that are writing for us as well, and to the non-binary people. I don't know that we have any non-binary writers in Star Trek. I wasn't able to figure that out. Regardless, I think that everyone has done an incredible job, and that is a big reason why Star Trek Discovery is feminist Star Trek. I mean, Star Trek has always been feminist, but I think that Discovery is the most feminist Star Trek we have ever had.
Yeah.
I want to move over into the next segment, our final question, which is, has the prominent presence of women in Star Trek Discovery affected you personally? I don't think anyone is going to say no. So I want to go around the table. Rachel, go for it.
I've been able to get a lot more friends into Discovery than I have in past Star Trek, because they were like so into the female characters of this one. And then I've been like retrospectively like, if you like this, here's like some old Star Trek I'm gonna make you watch. But I have a friend who's really into like martial arts and stuff, and he just ended up loving like Giorgio so much because of like watching the martial arts, that this friend who was never like into that like nerdy stuff, now I have like a couple of friends who are like, hey, I need to borrow your CBS All Access password because I need to watch. And it's fun. And it's also like, this is part of it being the first Star Trek show I've been able to watch live. I've been able to like connect with a lot more Star Trek fans online than I ever have before. And part of it is like women like you that like able to talk about like the female characters and like everyone relating to a different one. Like I know people that relate to like Michael, and I like on record how much I relate to Tilly, where my joke is she's a mess just in the way I'm a mess. And it's just, yeah, it's really nice having like that many female characters, where before it was like, here's these two and they're great, but like also more would be nice. Like,
yeah. And I think at the end of the day, like the fact that we tend to, like, when we think about TNG, and I'm guilty of this, I tend to think about Crusher and Troy. And there are many more women. there are more women on the ship. There are more women that we interact with through the 7 seasons, and this is true of every Star Trek series. But I tend to think of only a few specific core women at times, and not all of the women that were involved. I mean, obviously with Voyager, we had so many women on that ship that I'll go through and think of all of the prominent women on the bridge as cast members. So many amazing women that have just been there for a story arc or for an episode or two. Discovery has been, it's a smaller world right now. We have not gone to many places, but we have such a strong women presence on the ship. I just feel like there's so much more.
Yeah, I think definitely it's like easier to relate to women when you see them week to week, as opposed to Crusher, Troy, and then in the like season 1, Tasha Yar were the only women we saw like regularly. And then there would just be like a woman that would come in as a day player for most of the time, when it's hard to like, especially when you have a cast of like 7 people that are there every episode, and then you're like, relate to this one woman who's here for like 20 minutes.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, Annika?
I have to start by because I'm wearing my Team Cornwell jacket. that Katrina Cornwell is a role model for me now, the way that Esri Dax was a role model for me then. So Esri was the first Star Trek character that I really, or in the main cast, I should say, jumping off of what we were just saying, that I really like felt represented me on screen. I just related to her so much. And I think it was because everybody else up to that point was like a fully formed adult character, but Esri was still coming into her own power. Mm-hmm. And that's where I was, whatever, 20 years ago. So now I'm an adult and I need the next step. It's like, and obviously in between ensign and admiral, there's a lot. There's all those other ranks. And I don't know if I've gone through them all. But I'm at least at commander maybe. And so I need that admiral to look up to. And there's also, it's not a coincidence that they're both had counseling in their background. That's my, I'm just getting my master's degree in social sciences. And for my degree, I was actually studying Star Trek and how it relates to mental health. So it's like when you say affects you personally, like it literally affects me personally.
Yeah.
And then something that I noticed, around Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, people, and when I say people, I mostly mean men, would tell me two things, either one or the other or simultaneously, that I only liked Deanna Troi, for example, because she was a girl, or that I should only like Deanna Troi because she was the girl. And they would say the same thing with like even Captain Janeway. She's your favorite captain because she's a woman, or she has to be your favorite captain because she's the woman captain and I'm a woman. Therefore, it's like, that's the only one. And like, even if it was true, even if they were my favorites, like it's exhausting to have to justify that, I chose them because I like their character and not because they're women. Like it's not this thing. But in Discovery, there are so many women in so many different roles that their womanhood can't be weaponized against me in that same way. Like they can't say the only reason you like this character is because she's a woman, or you have to like the women characters. It's like there's so many women that any of them can be my favorite, and they're also their favorite. It's like everybody loves Tilly, because they relate to her. It's just so freeing in a way that there's so much variety. And even like for me, I can have all these favorites. I can be like, Michael Burnham's my favorite, and also Amanda Grayson's my favorite, and also Tilly's my favorite, and Detmer's my favorite. Like they're all my favorites. And I don't have to explain it to anyone because they get it. They're like, yeah, they're my favorite too.
Love it. I love it. All right, Heather, go for it.
Okay, so I mean, I have to be the one person here who is like, out of all the characters and all the amazing women characters, the one character that I relate to the most is not a woman on Discovery. But that doesn't matter because there's so many, like one of the amazing things I love about Discovery is there's so much depth to all these characters that there's even smaller things about each of them that you can personally connect to in some way. Like when you look at Tilly, Tilly is such a fabulous character, but the main thing that hits me really personally with her is her connection with her mother. And like you talked about Michael and her mother and how that really related to you, like Tilly's connection with her mother really resonated with me because I don't have a good relationship with my mother. It's always been very antagonistic and a lot about how she felt and not really considering how I felt. And as much as that, and this isn't even something that's really shown in the show. I mean, it's something that's based off of Tilly's novel, which is amazing.
Yes.
but it's something that you see that drive in her to be the best person that she wants to be, even though it's not the best person that her mother thinks she could be, which is, I think, a very opposite version of a mother-daughter relationship, but it's something a lot of people can relate with. The other thing I wanted to mention, kind of going back to part one and what I brought up in part one when I talked about relationships, because I felt bad, like I was kind of ragging on Michael and Ash, and I want to reiterate that as much as I don't think it's a very example of what a healthy, loving relationship would be, it's very realistic, and that's something that I can relate to as well. I wrote a nice long Twitter thread a few weeks back after the Red Angel episode, because there were a lot of scenes in that episode that related to me and an ex-boyfriend of mine, and just how you, especially like the first person you fall in love with, there's a connection there. And even though they're not really together, and they've done such a wonderful job of writing the two of them that they're not together, you don't get the sense that they're actually a couple, but you see how they are drawn back to each other when they need support or they need comfort or they just want someone to talk to. And that's really realistic for me, knowing that, like, to see a relationship like that depicted on screen, when most of the time it's either like fighting or it's either one opposite or the other. And they travel in this gray area, and relationships are very much something that travels in a gray area. So it's something that I really personally connected to as well.
Yeah, I really enjoy what they've done with Michael and Ash. And again, I don't disagree that that they don't necessarily need to be together right now. Like, they've got stuff to work out. I think that Ash is getting closer to figuring out an identity. Regardless, yes, the way that they've handled this, like, number one, Michael is an extremely emotional human being. I have never felt as emotionally driven as she's been. I have never felt that she's been shown in a hysterical light.
Yes.
Which is something that happens to women all the time.
Exactly.
Throughout all of this, she has never lost her agency. She has never been a damsel in distress. She makes the decision to go to Ash. I mean, I don't doubt that she still loves him, and he loves her. And that love brings them together. They're at a level now where they can be around each other. They trust each other. They find comfort in one another. But there's no rush to reconciliation.
Yes.
There's no, I can't function in life without Ash Tyler. No, she goes to him because she's gonna risk her life, right, to try to get the Red Angel. So she could be dying. So, like, if I were in those shoes, like, yes, I would be going to the people that I love the most to say, number one, this might happen. I might be gone. I am terrified. I need a hug. Like, I respect, I respect the fact that in no way has that relationship been something that she has had to have, and that she has had agency with interacting with Ash when she needs to, and he has been respectful towards her and hasn't, like, moved in and tried to kiss her because she's in an emotionally compromised state, or any of that really fun stuff that totally happens to women in real life. All right, let me move on over to Anna.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, Heather, you mentioned that the character that you relate most to is actually not a female character. That would be the same for me. It's actually Saru that I relate most to. That I tweeted out a couple of days ago about that, and even tweeted Doug Jones. But anyways, that's a little sidebar thing. But for me personally, I've mentioned it before, and part one. I've been a Trekkie for many years, and I feel that who I am as an individual has been affected by the positive roles that Star Trek has had, and not just women, but the men as well. I've learned that I need to, over the years as I've gotten older, that I need to embrace who I am as an individual. And guess what? I'm this tall, chunky Latina geek who has a voice and a will of my own. And I can tell you that I've been in relationships with men who have tried to suppress that. And they'll tell me, Anna, you shouldn't be so opinionated. You shouldn't read so much. You shouldn't be so smart. You know what? You just need to go to the gym instead of talking or reading so much. And yeah, that stuff has actually been told to me, and eventually you get to that point and you're like, what the F am I doing in this relationship? What am I doing in these relationships? So I remember after my last major breakup, and I'm sharing a little bit something personal with you guys, but I remember after my last relationship, I was really, really depressed. And, as one is when you break up with somebody. And I was eating comfort food and watching Voyager. And I was watching Janeway for the first time in a different light and with such awe and with such wonder. And I'm like, she's got all this strength and all this wisdom. Why haven't I been that way? And once, for whatever reason, I don't know what clicked in my brain, but I started to heal and I started to really value myself as an individual. And people may think that that's weird that a show would actually do that, but for whatever reason it did in my head. And, it's been several years since that. And I've made myself that focus to where I haven't been actively looking for anybody. And I've concentrated on and I've tweeted about this before too. I struggle with depression, so I have been my focus, my own focus, and making myself feel better about myself, being more assertive, more, trying to be happier. And I haven't found my tall geeky guy just yet, but I keep my eyes out. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, Star Trek has really been pivotal in my life. And I can tell you that for Discovery, I have never been, even TOS or TNG, I've never been this invested. And I've said this before in the other podcast that I did with you, Jeff and Carl. I've never been this invested in a show. And I just love the direction that they're going, and I can't wait for, I'm a little sad that season 2 is about to end, but I can't wait for season 3 and the wonderful direction that they're going to take their characters, their female characters and their male characters. So anyway, that's all I have.
Oh, well, I love you, girl. A lot of what you just said resonates, and I'll talk about that when it's my turn. But man, I wish I could give you a hug right now. All right. To our brightest star, our Nina.
As my grandpa would say when something made him happy, this opens my breathing.
Oh, that's such an old person thing to say.
I know. Oh, my grandpa. This opens my breathing. Okay. I think in general, the prominent presence of women just makes me feel good. I came to realize that when I was watching the other series, I was kind of stressed sometimes. Like, I would be always like scanning the background and like analyzing the ratio of like male extras to female extras. And like, I would always be I just wasn't just relaxing and watching the show for some reason. I was always looking for the diversity. I just started doing that, like just kind of absentmindedly. But when I watched Discovery, I just relaxed. Like, I felt like I wasn't looking for it anymore because it was just in front of me. It felt equal, it felt proportional, it felt balanced. So I just stopped like analyzing it like that, and I could just enjoy it. I don't know if anybody else, had that happen to them where their brain was like, oh my God, women, where are they? Or whatever. But happened to me. But this time I can just not be so analytical about it. And I can just enjoy it. That's really nice. Also, okay, here's my big fat point that I want to make here. There's a specific, I don't know if this is only in my head, but there's a specific type of personality that I feel like I relate to. And it's almost always, especially in Star Trek, attributed to men. It's this sort of confidence, this sort of type of cool bravado going on, this phenomenon of taking up space. And it's sort of usually accompanied by this like crackling, dry wit, super snappy sarcasm, a sort of people personness and like extroversion, just like a there-ness, a sort of command of the space. I feel like I always look for that in women because I don't know what this says about me, but I relate to that. And I feel like Q has this. I feel like Pike has some of this, kind of usually male characters like that. And so those are the ones that I see myself in a lot of the times. And when this sort of personality type or these characteristics are shown in women, it's often highly like criticized. Like when this sort of showed up in Pulaski, I feel like people are like, oh my God, I hate Pulaski, blah, blah, blah. You know, we all know sort of the feedback about Pulaski. Even, okay, I need to take a deep breath. I had this conversation with my male friend. This was like a year ago and I'm still getting in a tizzy about Kira. I was talking about how much I loved her. He was talking about how she's bossy or arrogant, the kind of things that people say about women when they have these traits. You know how it is. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot. Women have to, fit in a box and like be submissive, right? They can't have strong personalities. And then it turned into this whole conversation about how our own preconceptions affect what we think of a character. So just because of society and the messages that are just buried in us, if I see a certain character and he happens to be male, I might have a certain opinion about him. If I see like the same character but it's female, that might come off differently to me because we all have our own little buried biases.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Biases? I don't know. I know.
So basically, you're just telling me we need more non-binary people.
Maybe. I don't know. But and this guy, this seems like a reasonable thing. Like we all, our own preconceived notions affect how we are interpreting characters. But he was arguing with me and he was like, no, they don't. And I was like, sis. I was like, okay. Anyway, I'm still not over that. Those characteristics some show up in Kira a lot. Obviously, that was an example of her being criticized for it. So when there is this personality, this sort of essence that I'm talking about, it's not as well received in women. And if it is portrayed in women, which it rarely is compared to when it's portrayed in men, it's often accompanied with like a hypersexuality. Like think of the Borg Queen has some of this, but is also like weirdly sexual. Same with even like one-off characters like Ardra from Devil's Due, super random, but same thing. Female Q even, like they all have this sort of bravado thing going on, but there's weird sexual undertones. Like we just can't get the characteristics. It also has to be like mirror university. I don't know why. But there's been grains of this in female characters. I feel like Kalar has a little bit of this. Janeway has it at times. B'Elanna has it at times. It comes through. But when I saw Reno, I was like, that's the character that I'm talking about with this personality. She's fully that. There's no weird sexual undertones. She's hilarious. She is just like unabashedly that character. And I was like, finally, like I felt like I'd been waiting for that. And somehow that made me feel validated. Like there is nothing better than when she marched into sickbay, waving her finger in the air going, I need medical attention. Like there was nothing better than that. Like I loved that. I finally felt like aspects of my personality were like reflected. I don't know what that says about me again, but I just felt so validated in that moment when I saw her. Like, I just feel like she's the female character I've been waiting for. And I really, really appreciate that. And so that portrayal has affected me personally because it just makes me feel good about myself and makes me feel good about the state of feminism. I don't know. And Michael also has some of this. And I think Michael's mom also had some of this. And I just feel like the show is doing such a great job at sprinkling character traits among the female characters and not putting them in like pre-existing boxes. I love that. I feel like I'm finally seeing the personalities that I've been like waiting for, and like the combination of traits that make a complete fleshed out character that's not a trope. It's just so good. I'm in love with it.
Annika, did you want to say something in response? I know you had your hand up for a while.
Well, no, I just, when she was describing the sexual overtones of that, and she said it was something, before she said, like a mirror universe, and I was like, so Emperor Giorgio. And so I just want to reiterate my issues with why do they keep, I like the directions that Giorgio is going, that we are getting to see her vulnerabilities, but I wish that she still didn't have these mirror universe hangups of the overtly sexual. I'm glad that we finally got a confirmation that Reno had a wife, because that was like, oh, look, women who love women exist in the Prime universe. And it's like fair and normal. But she's dead, so we still need better on-screen representation of that. I love that Nina, like, first of all, stop apologizing for wanting to see that character in a woman, because the more you described it, I was like, Riker.
Exactly.
It was so Riker.
All I wanted was that to just be in a woman. I just wanted it to. And now I feel like it is, and nothing makes me I just want to dance about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you should dance about it, because you absolutely, like, that's what I mean. Like, and obviously I relate to different characteristics than you do in an Esri or like B'Elanna, but when I saw them on screen, I like, it was like, you know, finally Star Trek understands me.
Yeah.
Like, I was never going to be a Beverly Crusher. Like, that just wasn't me. I loved her, and I looked at her as like a maternal figure, but it wasn't the same characteristics. And so it's like that feeling of, like, Star Trek finally gets me. I'm so glad that you have that in Reno. And I think she's a great character, and like, you should go with it.
Thank you.
I should let you know, you're not the only one who's gotten like say you're not the only one who's had weirdly tense conversation with guy friends about like female Star Trek characters.
That sounds like a conversation that we should have, maybe in part 3 of the series.
My God, I'm gonna need tranquilizer before we start.
I think that it's an important facet to this discussion that we're just not going to have time for this one. But it's so important, especially talking about characters, because Reno has joined the ranks of Pulaski and many other women with getting this criticism.
I know. I saw the criticism for her, and I was like, no.
I
reject that.
No. There is always this pushback, because women say, it's really interesting that I posted something about this character and 15 men and 2 women said they don't like them. Men get really upset. And I mean, I do agree. Not all men dislike characters, like women characters, strictly because they're women. However,
if they do, it's subconscious.
Yes, I do believe that there is a gender bias, and that some people look at characters of the opposite sex, or characters that they're unfamiliar with that type of person, and have this inherent bias. And sometimes you realize it, sometimes you don't want to admit it. And I think it's important to have healthy discussions around that. Reno is one of those characters who I have seen criticized so much. And I think I've seen people talk about Tig Notaro's acting. Tig herself said she was uncomfortable with the technobabble and everything else. And so maybe that, I don't know. I think that it is crucial to talk about, even when those opinions have clout and validation and are not based in misogyny, how those conversations still affect us as women. how seeing those comments, especially when they come in bulk from men, affect us as women, and what we can do to have better conversations about things like that. You can't have discussions about women without including women. You can't have conversations celebrating women without women, and you can't have conversations celebrating women where you also almost refer to them in expletives or derogatory terms about women. We need to have conversations as women about women. Those need to be forefront. And I've gotten a lot of slack recently because I've made some statements about who should be writing stories about marginalized people. And I'm going to just be totally clear about this. I respect when educated allies write about marginalized people as allies without mistruths, with respect. However, because there aren't enough voices, there aren't enough LGBTQ voices, there aren't enough people of color, there aren't enough women. Like, I think out of those groups, like, women alone have the most visibility right now. I think that as you go down the spectrum of women of color, women of color with disabilities, like, it's smaller and smaller. And so it is so important to me to elevate those voices. And that's why, like, I'm doing a panel like this. That's why I want to do a panel where I bring disabled people to talk about disability representation in Star Trek. That's why I want to bring people who suffer from mental health issues to talk about mental health representation in Star Trek. And that just goes across the board for everything. I don't want to hear a white person talk about Black culture until there are so many Black people talking about their culture and white people listening and being educated. Like, I appreciate when allies speak up, but that's not the first voice that I want to listen to. If you're going to have conversations about people that are not you, or even people that are in your, like me as a queer person, like, not all queer people are the same. I want to have conversations with everyone in the spectrum because we're not homogenous. I want to get all of those perspectives out there. And it goes the same for women. Like Heather, Heather's favorite Discovery character is not a woman. Like, it's important to realize that we're not homogenous. I know I say that word a lot, but it's something that comes up that I think a lot of people don't sometimes even understand what that word means or how their own perception supports that idea. So anyway, I said too much. I have not forgotten Kat. I want to hear from our veteran. She's our veteran Trekkie. Has the representation of women in Star Trek Discovery affected you personally?
As a writer, for one thing, I'm able to write fanfic about Cornwell instead of writing about Picard or, Beverly, who's a more traditional female character. Although I do sexualize my fiction, so, whatever. That's something that I heard a lot as criticism from men. For a long time, they totally dismissed fan fiction, which is written a lot by women. But also these are the ones I call fanboys, okay? They've criticized Discovery because women are taking the characteristics that men have been allowed to have for half a century or more throughout the history of fiction. I like that all these aspects of these women speak to me. Now, I'm going to say I'm a cisgender heterosexual woman, so take that however you need to. But I want to say this about each of the characters, if that's okay. Burnham has persistence, but she also has guilt. Spock pointed out that she takes the whole world on her shoulders. And so these are fallibilities you see in male characters. She's also super determined, and that's what I love about Burnham, and she's a big expert in her field. So, Pike does look to her. Lorca looked to her as a problem solver as well. Amanda, she's a good mom, and she worked with Spock's disability. and she wanted to be better. There's a part where she says, I'm a bad mother. And my friend said, oh my God, she's being, this is characterization destruction. I just hate this. And I said, well, this is something all mothers say when their kid is having difficulties. They blame themselves. But she has guilt that's inappropriate because her big mistake, as far as being a mother, was submitting to Sarek's will. I want my child raised as a Vulcan. I want them both raised as Vulcans. And you see that in the first season and then the second season. First about Burnham and then about Spock, So I thought that was interesting. And Tilly is that nervous genius, and her mom insisted she be pretty. And Georgiou, interestingly, insists that she have agency, that she be the captain she was in the Mirror Universe. But she also criticized her hair. So Cornwell's fatal error was sleeping with Mirror Lorca. She gave in to seduction. But she was also evaluating him as a friend who had known him for many years. Somebody criticized her because, this was another woman, criticized her because, well, she was a psychiatrist and she's not supposed to be doing that, as if she were Lorca's psychiatrist. And I said, no, she's not Lorca's psychiatrist. She's a friend who is a psychiatrist. So I think she was, and she said this, that she was trying to get a perspective on him, like she was checking him out to, see if he was worthy of command. Did he still have these huge issues of PTSD? Which were really mirror characteristics. Her strength through her sorrow. When she saw that all the people that had died in the 9 months of Discovery was gone. When they got to Starbase 1 and 80,000 people had just been wiped out, she was just stunned. She was totally stunned. She kept functioning, but you could see that she was totally stunned. Yet, on the other hand, she had this wonderful discussion in the brig with L'Rell. She represented the Federation. L'Rell represented the Klingon race, the warriors. Cornwell is saying, we are going to be exterminated. And L'Rell says, yeah. So people have condemned Cornwell as a war criminal. And I'm like, she's not yet. And that whole thing was an allegory about World War II. To me, we used the atom bomb twice. And people are like, well, yeah, I know about that, but Cornwell's still a war criminal. I'm like, yeah, never mind. Let's move on. Oh, she's gotten condemnation for being too male, or for shutting down Leland and Pike.
Putting men in their place, I think, is what someone
exactly.
had referred to it as.
We can't have that. Oh my God.
I think
she's the admiral. She said, leave your male posturing where it belongs, not here, not now. Now, Georgiou, Space Hitler, that's their nickname for her. And yeah, I'm not happy that character is on a redemption arc. I'm not super happy about it because she killed millions of people in the Terran Empire. So I part of me wants to see a redemption arc for her because I'm that kind of person. I want a happy ending for everything. I have to say about Landry that she came out and she was kind of a caricature, what I call the femcho character. She comes out and says, oh, what are we gonna, we got to feed the animals and all that kind of stuff. And she died because she tried to kill an innocent creature, the tardigrade. So I kind of like that part. And I'm not saying I like that she died, but I like that she suffered the fate that usually is allotted to a person of color or any male character who's dumb. So, I mean, it was an equal representation in a way. But it's also been pointed out she was a person of color and she got killed off in the first 4 episodes. So that sucked. But speaking personally, I think I relate to Cornwell the most, and also Tilly, because as you've probably seen, I talk way too much. And I get excited about something, and I'm like, I also suffer from depression. I've seen aspects of that in each of the female characters at times. You know, Laurel is upset, and she's probably been depressed about her child and about Tyler. I loved when Burnham told Tyler, "You're going to have to work through this on your own." I had to, you know, in the first season. Star Trek has done a lot for me in my life, and Captain Janeway, I recently rewatched Voyager, and I thought, she is one of the best captains in Starfleet, man. She is awesome. They are role models, and I love that. I really wish that I had grown up with Voyager. I also wanted to say, this is all over the place, I'm sorry, but I also wanted to say, when I joined the Coast Guard, women represented 9% of the total population. By the time I left 20 years later, I think we were maybe up to 12%, but it was one of the first services where we had a woman commanding officer. She was in charge of a small ship, but still, wow! I was like, yeah, right on. But again, that was, 20 years ago. We've come a long way in Star Trek's time, and I really love that about Star Trek. It's like so great. And Ariam, a woman, sacrificed herself like a hero. Burnham is a hero. Cornwell is a hero of a different kind, the leadership kind. Sakun and Detmer are just flying experts and operations experts. And Tilly is a godsend to Stamets a lot of times. Because she's a feeling person and also because she's a technical wizard. So I hope I haven't forgotten any females. I probably have. Oh, God, Reno. Oh, God.
You're good.
I loved her line. I loved her line when she says, "I'm an engineer and I can read, so she could be a doctor." I was like, what?
So she's an engineer and a doctor.
Yeah, that's right.
But not a poet.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. I did not like that she rhymed Hugh with poo, but never mind. Tig does have a fantastic bit about poo, so.
I made a tweet last week, I don't know, and it's something we can talk about next time we get together, where I basically was applauding Discovery for showing me that women can do anything. And the meaning of that is that we have seen women in every position on the bridge. We've seen a woman leading the Klingon Empire. Discovery has done this in a way that other Star Trek series really have not done as thoroughly, with showing just so many women doing all the things, we'll say. So it was that, and then talking about disability representation and queer representation, and the comments I received because I used a picture of Cornwell. I now automatically call her Cornrell, so I have to think when just because I used a photo of Cornwell and Spock and Hugh and Paul, I got a lot of comments about, well, have you not seen the rest of Star Trek? And of course I have. And the reality here for me is not that I haven't recognized the way that Star Trek has elevated all kinds of people throughout its 53-year history. It's that Discovery has done this for me in a way that, as a queer woman with a disability, I see all of these characters together in one show, all portrayed in a positive light. It's been, so I watched Enterprise. I watched about 2 seasons of Enterprise when it aired. And that was the first Star Trek series I was watching live, and for reasons, mostly being that I do feel like Enterprise is Star Trek for men, written by men. I don't think it serves women well. It didn't keep my interest. It was not my Star Trek. And so I stopped watching, and I came back and I revisited and I watched all of Star Trek and went to the convention, and here comes Discovery. And so I've been podcasting for about 3 years, and I started podcasting. I started doing Shortly, where I was talking about STLV and conventions, etc. Wasn't planning on doing Discovery show, and then we went to STLV, and people are like, oh, are you going to do a Discovery show? So Jeff and I got together and decided to do this. I never, ever, ever expected things to come up like sexual assault. I had, for the first time, really, and I don't know why, I think I just felt safe and empowered, but I started talking about the sexual assault that's happened to me. And only a few months later, like my life behind the scenes was slowly erupting. I had been in a domestically violent relationship for 6 years without ever really fully coming out and admitting that's what it was. And there's a whole lot of my personal history that I won't go into, but that I have had to reflect on and understand, like, why I stayed in this relationship. Because aside from people asking me why I stayed in this relationship, I question myself a lot of times, because I do feel that I am a strong, intelligent woman. And the fact that I stayed in something that was so bad for me for so long is something that I am still working through. But what started happening with Discovery and with podcasting is I started finding a voice. Fortunately, I had already started using this voice before my life changed. If people have listened to DiscoTrek, they might have an idea of what I went through, and I don't want to recount everything because it's not fun and it takes a long time. But essentially, Star Trek Discovery has been in the background while my life has done this crazy 360, and it has had so many different meanings. I have found that after leaving that relationship, after trying to come to terms with how my identity as a woman was suffocated and abused and taken away from me during that time, I've been doing a lot to reclaim that identity and the strength that comes with that. So, like, my long sword fencing is a big part of that, because what else? Like, it is so empowering just to hold a sword. Like,
long sword, no less.
It is amazing to me to be able to protect myself. Like, the sport in and of itself is a lot of fun, but what I take from that the most is that I can protect myself if I need to. Having had all of these beautiful iterations of womanhood, motherhood, just all facets, along with me, it's not only have I found comfort in identifying with so many of these women and identifying with their stories and then talking about my own stories through podcasting, it's like the crew has been my friends the whole time. It's been like Discovery has been there for me through all of this trauma that I've had, and it continues to be there while I work through this PTSD and reclamation of my identity. And it has just, it's hard to express how powerful of a thing it is to be trying to come back to myself as a person, as a human being, as a woman, and having all of this support, being able to look to Discovery to help with my healing process, whether it's finding meaning in a random quote and internalizing that and working with that, whether it's podcasting and talking about this with friends, whether it's engaging with people on social media or sitting here with all of you today. It's been the background of all of this. And so it's beyond the representation of women and the strength that I get from seeing all of these amazing women characters, the community that's been built around it, just so many new fans, like just by watching Discovery and interact. Like, that's how I met, I think, most of you, are through these conversations and just talking about Discovery and then talking about Star Trek. It's really just opened up a new facet of Trek that I wasn't there. And it's been really amazing. And so it's hard to talk about. Obviously, I really haven't gotten to the point where I can eloquently express how powerful of an experience it has been to have Star Trek Discovery in the background of my life, and just as a huge part of my life while I go through all of this personal stuff. I really this will always be my Star Trek now. And a large part of that is because I am finally seeing. I feel like I can connect with so many of these characters in ways that I haven't with other versions of Star Trek. And I don't mind saying that as a 38-year-old who came into Star Trek, 10 years ago or whatever. I think that is just evidence of how Star Trek will continue to affect us and evolve us as a society, and be there. I didn't cry too much saying all that. It's hard. I am still in this constant process of dealing with the evolution of my life these days, and podcasting has just been so crucial to putting me on a path of healing. So thanks for listening to me say all that, ladies. I'm like, now it's me going off in tangents.
Heather, your courage is so admirable, and I am so inspired by you and your strength, and I love you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to say thank you for sharing it, and not just this time, but every time that you talk about your personal life and how Star Trek has affected it. I agree. I'm always inspired, and I always want to just say thank you for putting it out there.
Yeah.
I mean, Star Trek has affected my life greatly too, and it makes me feel like we're like kindred spirits, that we're all connected through this thing that we love, that we relate to, because it does affect us. It affects us in so many different ways and across so many years.
I think that having such strong women representation, and then having these ongoing discussions with other women about that representation, has truly empowered me to feel like talking about these things is important. I struggle all of the time because before I left that relationship, I was run through the gutter and told that, what have I done with my life, and what do I contribute? And that has set me down a path where, even though I feel that, I didn't start podcasting for any other reason than I go to a convention and I knew a lot about it, and I wanted to help other people have a good convention experience. And I started talking, and people started responding. And I found that for whatever reason, I decided I need to open up and talk about sexual assault in my Star Trek podcast. When the stuff came up with Laurel and Tyler, it's selfish in a way because I am using my podcasting to help me process my history. Anytime that somebody turns around and says, thank you, it's meaningful. I worry all of the time about what people think of me for using my voice in the way that I do. Like right now, I'm like, I cry too much in my podcasts.
Okay.
If it makes you feel better, I'm crying right now.
No, you made me cry, Heather. Now I want to give you a hug.
Wait, guys, group hug.
Group hug.
You're getting a group hug. Yeah.
Heather, it's not selfish at all, because we're all helping one another. We all have our own story to tell, what have you, and I'm glad that you shared that with us. I really am. And I didn't think that I could respect you even more, but I respect you even more for having that courage, for saying that, because that's not easy, especially in the time that we live in now. So, I just want to say, don't feel like you think it's selfish. It's not at all.
I think that when we continue the conversation, I'll add more, because there's really so much more to be said, for me on a personal level, but also what I experience as a podcaster, as a woman running a Facebook group, as a woman, that the pushback that I have dealt with throughout my entire career is not the word I want to use, but
existing as a woman.
And especially in the Star Trek community, like I try to be a beacon of positivity for Star Trek, because that Star Trek is a beacon of positivity for me. And I want to be a positive voice in this community. I have gone from wanting to help people about a convention to wanting to use my voice, to wanting to just amplify everyone else's voices, because I have found it to be a powerful experience for myself, and I want other people to at least try and find your voice and speak out, because when we do this, we just continue to help other people. But as positive as I try to be, like, my experience in this world has not always been positive, and a lot of those interactions have warped my mind in a way that I second guess myself a lot with what I put out there now. I mean, it's that, and it's also specifically the things that were drilled into my head for 6 years, and especially before I left. You know, I couldn't leave without being told I was a pile of, you know what. I know that that's not who I am, but it has still been a really difficult thing. And it's like, on one hand, I'm a woman that does not care what people think of me. I am almost 40 and I'm going to go shave half my head off next Friday. Like, I am a believer in being who you are and putting yourself out there. At the same time, it does matter to me how others perceive me, because I'm not perfect. None of us are, but it's important to me, I guess. I don't like offending people. I don't like people thinking the worst of me. I have enemies that I have no desire to have enemies, and I don't know why I have enemies. I think it's important to continue the conversation, because our experiences as women influence our relationships with Star Trek and with the Star Trek community. And there are things that I feel are important to say that I think I will say. It's been enlightening, and a lot of it is because of Discovery and what has happened.
Yeah, if I can just put this in here, it really has kind of shocked me how much misogyny I've seen on the web about Discovery.
Yeah.
And
It's pretty jarring.
Heather, I want to commend you for coming out on social media and saying these things, because I think that you're probably giving a lot of women the strength to do what you did and leave toxic relationships. And I love that you will sometimes engage and then just stop dealing with those toxic people, you know, because you just have to. You have to. And that's an example too. Those are part of the reasons that I just love you. I'm glad that I followed you. I have not had personal experience with that except in my family of origin. And I was a girl and I was supposed to be a lady, blah, blah. And I went in the Coast Guard, you know, ha, ha.
Yeah.
But I dealt with misogyny there for 20 years. So it's a constant. It's just, we live in a patriarchy, and I hope that Discovery is going to help turn that around. It's
hope
a
so.
strong voice, you know?
I think it's also being fueled by the political climate right now.
Oh,
where people
Jesus,
feel
yeah.
that they could,
Definitely.
you know, there's the xenophobia. I mean, you got people saying stuff about women, about Mexicans, about, you know, LGBTQ. I mean, it's a very disgusting climate that we live in right now. And I can only hope that Star Trek Discovery will continue to be a beacon for hope and change for the future.
Yeah.
I agree. All right. Well, I think we'll continue the conversation for part 3.
It sounds like it's gonna be. It sounds like it's gonna be like a personal story thing next time too, which I think is gonna be really cathartic for all of us
and empowering.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
That is the root now of a lot of my podcasting. But like, I sit here and think, oh, like, should I bring that up again? Do I talk about this personal stuff again? We'll continue that conversation. Preview for next episode. In the meantime, I think that we can all agree that Discovery is boldly going to places that women in Star Trek have been before. But I guess now with this this 4 jump drive. We're jumping. I don't know. I was trying to come up with some cool metaphor, and that's just not going to work out.
We can go anywhere.
It's not a competition, it's a continuum.
It's a continuum.
There you go.
Next
Yeah,
level,
it weaves
next level.
its way through life. It's the basis of life. And you could make that equivalent with women. We are the sex that gives birth to the world. Okay, so yeah,
That's very true.
Very
I don't. Yeah, I was gonna say I apologize to all the men out there that are so intimidated by powerful women who are confident.
No.
No apologies.
No
It's
apology.
It's actually
Right?
You know
really
how
nice
we'll
to-
say it? We can say we thank all of our male allies for
Yeah.
being
Yes.
there alongside
Yeah.
us. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
No,
no
I've seen like a lot of
Yeah, no
positive
apology.
feedback. I've seen a lot of positive feedback, like for
Yeah.
our first part of like
Mhm,
guys saying, "Really enjoyed this. Like, keep it up." I
Yeah.
was like, "Nice. That's super refreshing. I love that."
Yes.
Absolutely.
yes, God, with all those other voices, and they're just really loud. These toxic people. So it's
Mhm.
Oh
great
yeah.
to see male allies out there.
We have
Absolutely.
a lot of them, and I think that's
Yeah.
something else that gets misconstrued in these conversations about feminism.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
we spent, I don't know, 10 minutes talking about how much we love Captain Pike. We,
Right.
it's not, there's not a misandry here.
No.
So maybe we can
Right.
talk about that next time.
Yeah.
But thank you, all of you, for sitting down with me once again. Very, very quickly, let's say a goodbye and remind people where to find us on social media. Annika, I see you first, so go.
You can find me on Twitter at Manic Pixie Dane. And if you go to manicpixiedust.com, that will link you to everywhere you can find me. And if you want to hear me be overly personal, laugh too much, and also cry too much about Star Trek Discovery and all things Star Trek, listen to Antimatter Pod.
Which is hosted by 2 women.
Mhm.
Yes.
Listen to it, because there are very few podcasts that are only women, and it's super awesome and great. So please, I recommend. Rachel, where can we find you?
I'm Dramadork884 on Twitter and all social media, and I'm also on the podcast Masters of Mayhem, which is a tabletop RPG podcast.
Sweet, sweet. Nina?
You can find me at Freckle on Twitter. Hopefully it wasn't too all over the place in this, but it doesn't matter. If you enjoy my ramblings, then I live tweet Discovery, and it's really a rollicking good time when I'm not like basically dying of happiness or sadness dramatically. But that's a good time too. That was like the weirdest explanation of all time. Anyway, follow me if you want. And
Yes.
thank you for having me on. I am over the moon to be involved in this. Like, the moon is here. I'm above it. I flew. I'm a million miles from the moon. Follow me. I love you all.
We love you back. Kat, how can we find you?
Hi, yeah, I'm Blue Cat, like, Democrat KAT, Blue Cat at Maria Maya, MarjaMaya. And I'm on Twitter. I don't do Facebook, blah, blah, but y'all are welcome to direct message me if you want to express something. I only get direct messages from people I follow, though. So, yeah, it's been a really great pleasure to hear everyone's perspective. It's wonderful. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, we're glad you got to join us this time. Anna, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter, DarthAnna77.
And my Zahia Heather, how can we find you?
You can primarily find me on Twitter at NerdyGal33, and my profile name is Never Apologize for Being Nerdy, because that's something no one should ever apologize for.
And never apologize
Especially
for
women.
never apologize for being a woman.
That too.
All right.
Nerdy woman, yeah.
I've got to go pet a cat and sling some swords. I guess I should
All right.
actually end the show. Yeah, we do it all. We love animals. We hit people in the head with shiny steel. It's, yeah. Thank you. We will see you guys for part 3, where we get very personal.